Matt, what is a seven-figure human being?
That is a very good question. There are no doubt commonalities between high earners. Somebody did a study in the late 80s or maybe the late 90s where they studied the top 1% of people. This is not a trait you're going to be expecting me to say, I promise. Whatever commonality you think I'm going to say, it's completely different. But they did a study where they went and studied the top 1% of earners, and they tried to see, like, what do they all have in common? What connections, what commonalities do they have? And what they found.
First of all, Matt, thank you very much for taking time out of your day to hop on this call with me. I appreciate it. You've got a bigger following than I do, but honestly, kind of wanted to do this a little selfishly because I wanted to ask you questions and learn about your story a little bit more. I know we talked at that meetup we had in Scottsdale. That was really cool. Got to know you a little bit there. And I wanted to have more of a formal setting to kind of sit down and pick your brain because I think there's a lot that we could glean from this kind of conversation that others could also glean from. So, Matt, thanks for hopping on, brother. Let's just jump straight into this, dude. Like, tell me about who is Matt. We'll start broad picture. Who are you, dude? What do you do? What makes you you? All that good stuff. Quick intro.
Yeah, so my name's Matt Shields. Long story short, dropped out in 9th grade. I bought my first course when I was 17 years old. It was $597. I remember going to my mom saying, "Mom, I'm not going to college. I want to buy a course on SMMA, and I'm going to learn how to start a marketing agency for local businesses, and that's how I'm going to make my living." My mom looked at me and started crying, and she was terrified for me. But when I saw those tears, when I saw how she reacted, I realized I am the epitome of a disappointment to my own mother right now. And seeing such a negative reaction just made it very clear for me, like, I don't care what I have to do. I'm not going to see that look on my mom's face again. And so I started working 70 hours a week as a 17-year-old kid. I busted my ass for 2 years straight. I built a few different agencies. We would get to 10K a month, 20K a month, 30, 40K a month, and then we'd crash back down. So I built 5 agencies in a row to 6 figures, multi 6 figures, and then they went all back down to zero. And then 3 years ago, I go to my first event ever. I was 19 years old. At the time, I was technically making $0 a month. And I go to this event in Mexico, hosted by Joel Kaplan. It was his inner circle event. So all the guys that are doing 50K a month, 100K a month, 200, 300K a month. And I go to that event and I'm talking to people with absolutely no value to provide whatsoever, making $0 a month, feeling completely out of place, terrible networker because I was very introverted, just like feeling way out of place at this event. But as the event went on, as the days went on and I met more and more people, I had more and more conversations, I started to almost get like attacked by this undeniable belief that I am capable of making $100,000 in a month. Like it was almost like I wanted to fight this belief because I almost didn't want it to be true because I wanted to sit in my own comfort. But it was just this like, dude, like there's stop. You can make 100K a month. Like you're talking to these people and you literally know they're not that smart. Like a lot of them aren't actually that smart. You know you can do this, but you're being a little bitch. You're being a little bitch. And that's what the voice was. It was like, you know you can do this, dude. You just gotta get some balls and do it. And at that event, I wrote down, I will make 100K a month before the year is over. It was 2021. It was February. So I had 11 months to do it. I said, I'm at $0 a month, 19 years old. I will make 100K a month before the year is over. And I wrote that down every single day of 2021. I have the journal to prove it. Every single day I wrote down, I will make 100K a month before the year is over. 11 months later, we were doing 170K a month. And it's been history ever since. So that's my story in a nutshell.
I like it. The Cliff Notes, dude. That's wild, man. I'm sure you probably said that story over and over again a bunch of different times. But what year was that, by the way? When
That
was
was
that?
2021. So about
21.
a little over 2.5 years ago.
Yeah, everything with COVID was happening at that time too. I think
Yep.
it really hit in 2020, but still dealing with it at that point in time too.
Yep.
Okay, so lots to unpack there. Let's go back. I want to go back to you said you dropped out of high school, right? Freshman year? Is that what
Yeah,
it
so I
was?
left high school after 9th grade. I technically did online classes, but that's a scam. So really I have a 9th grade education, like if we're keeping it real.
Gotcha. And why? I guess why'd you decide to drop out?
Man, um, school was always a really bad place for me. I always either got in trouble or I felt troubled. Um, I was a troublemaker in middle school. I remember competing with my best friend Jay, who could get more detentions in 1 year, and I won. So
Wow.
that will give you some perspective on who I was. Ninth grade came
Uh-huh.
around, and I stopped being a troublemaker, but I was just a troubled man. Like I was just a troubled kid now. I stopped acting out. I stopped being so loud and talkative, and all that because when you act out, it's because there's something internally that is off, which makes you act out externally. So when I stopped acting out
Mhm.
externally in ninth grade, I just kept all that internal turmoil bottled up and it became worse and worse. And I started developing really bad anxiety, started getting really depressed, started getting really bad OCD. And it got to the point where like I just wouldn't go to school. And I told my parents, like, you could force a cop to take me to school. The second the cop turns his back, I'm running home. Like it was that bad, dude.
Wow.
So that's why I dropped out. Um, and that's why I left.
So at the time, so you talk about you're a troublemaker. You also troubled. Um, uh, uh, and obviously, I don't want to, I don't want to ask or dive into family life at all. But I really want to figure out because I'd be curious to know what during that time, because you're probably a little bit of a different person now than you were then, right? Um, what do you think allowed that pivot? Because at the time, you were, I would assume, didn't really care much about school at all, right? Like you just didn't care to go. Were you? Because I think there's a couple different types of people in high school. Like myself, I didn't care about learning in school. I wasn't a troublemaker, but I wanted to like build a business on the side, so I didn't really care much. You sound like you're in a little bit of a different spot. So, can you talk me through like who were you then, and what do you think pivoted, or like when did the shift happen um, for you? It sounds like it was probably actually that day when you were like, you saw the look on your mom's face and you're like, this day forward, do you think it was a day, like it was an instant where everything changed, or was it a culmination of things happening?
It was definitely a culmination of spending 3 years away from school. Like, the thing about high school
Ah,
the thing about the public education system was founded by John D. Rockefeller, if I'm not mistaken, and I believe I haven't fact checked this, but I believe he's the richest man at the time, and he was quoted saying, "I don't need a nation full of employees, or I don't need a nation full of entrepreneurs. I need a nation full of employees." That's what the guy who funded our
mhm,
education system was quoted saying. So the thing is, when you have entrepreneurial DNA and like that's the type of person you are, being thrown into a box that was literally created for employees, it's like a fly trying to fly out of a jar and banging his head jar to jar to jar to jar. I can't get out of this. And then discovering business for me was like realizing the lid of the jar was off the whole time and I could just fly right out. So it was
mm,
a culmination of banging my head against the wall for 3 years straight. And then one day I watched a YouTube video by a guy named Billy Wilson called How I Dropped Out of College and Started a Six-Figure Business. I watched that video. I watched Billy, and Billy's like this introverted, kind of awkward, like not super charismatic or gregarious personality, right? And I'm just watching him and I'm like, if I see myself in this guy so much. If he can do it, I don't see why I can't do it. And that was a big turning moment for me.
yeah,
Is watching Billy and saying, okay, this is actually real. I can do this.
interesting. So it sounds like you kind of didn't know what was possible or what the world was like or what you wanted to do until you left school. And then you start experiencing these other things and meeting these other people and learning from these other people. And you're like, whoa, this ceiling's a lot bigger than I thought. Matter of fact, that there is no ceiling. Is that kind of what you say? So you started really learning about
100%.
what the world was like and then what your potential was. So that sounds like that really rocked a lot of your limiting beliefs then, huh?
100%, 100%. It everybody says belief, belief, belief. I'm more fascinated with realization. That's how I would describe it. It wasn't really like
Ah,
belief. It was like now I know. Like I realized it's possible. Whether or not I do it is up to me, but I realized it's a real thing. Most of my friends in high school, they didn't even know you could make money online. They didn't even know you could build a legitimate business online. They had never watched a YouTube video on it. They had never seen somebody where they said, "I
mm,
think that person is honestly telling me the truth, and they're making six figures plus from the internet." That experience never happened for them. So watching that video gave me that realization. I said, "You know what? I can do this." And that's what led me on the path of eventually buying Billy's course, joining his program, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So you got are you running several agencies now, or did you just start a bunch and then now you're just focusing on one? Where are you at with
So
all that?
we just started a third agency, so we have 3 right now. Yep.
Okay, cool. And then just for a little bit of context, what are these agencies? What is the service model, the delivery, all that?
So Facebook ads plus high level CRM lead follow up, and then plus a little bit of coaching. One of our agencies has coaching as well. The other agency is just Facebook ads and GHL. The other one's just Facebook ads and GHL too. The new one is.
Gotcha. And then what's your role in those currently?
So I'm basically COO. So I am managing the operations, managing the back end, making sure things are streamlined, making sure we can scale as effectively as possible.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So I've got quite a few like deep questions for you. I just want to
Sweet.
ask a couple semi surface level, just because I want to set the context of like who you are and all that stuff. So we can get into it later. But okay, so you've got that, and then you guys are helping real estate agents right now, right? Is that kind of your niche, or do you guys have multiple niches?
Real estate agents and then 2 others that are also kind of in real estate. So yeah, but main real estate's the umbrella that
Okay.
we're operating in.
Okay, cool. And then why the agency model?
Honestly, dude, when I watched Billy's videos, I was just like, "This makes sense." Like, my mom's a local business owner. My mom's a real estate agent, actually. Um, I have I knew other business owners. I was like, yeah, they need more customers. They're not, they're making 100K a year, but they're not making 1 million a year. Like these guys definitely want to make more
Hmm.
money. If I can figure out how to get them more clients from social media, they don't know how to use social media. They don't want to figure it out. This makes a lot of sense. Like it just made sense to me. And ever since then, I've been infatuated with the agency model because it's such a great beginner business. You're learning the fundamentals, the foundations of all skills. You're learning customer service, how to serve people and provide a good experience. You're learning how to
Hmm.
build product. You're learning how to sell. You're learning how to promote and market. You're learning how to manage a small team and start to lead a group of people. It's like all the foundational principles of a successful entrepreneur you learn through marketing. So I feel I could go and I could start a local business. I could go and I could start an e-com store. I could start a coaching program because I have these foundational skills. And that's why I
Hmm.
love the agency business.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. What so if I remember your timeline correctly, did you try anything else previously before getting into the agency model? Like, did you try drop shipping? Did you try trading? Like any of these other big things that gurus talk about all the time?
I started off buying and selling shoes on eBay when I was like 13.
Nice.
I actually made a little bit of money from that, and I got a lot of cool shoes. I was a sneakerhead, so that was fun for me. Um, I tried to start a software company when I was 17. It was called Shop for
Oh.
You. It was going to scan the internet for a product you wanted, find you the best deal, and buy it for you, and then like take a split on whatever, however much we saved you. That was the thesis. Um, and that failed miserably, as you might be able to imagine. And then I started looking into drop shipping and stuff, and I was watching drop shipping. I was like, this is kind of cool. I think I could do this. You're buying and reselling products just like I did with shoes. But then I saw a video by some guru overseas somewhere saying drop shipping's saturated. It was like
Hmm.
2019. Drop shipping's dead. Drop shipping's saturated. It's too late. You missed out. And I was like, damn, I missed out. And he was like trying to promote his Amazon FBA scam or
Yeah.
whatever. But I
Yeah.
was like, drop shipping's dead. And so I was like, well, that sucks. And it sucked so bad because I was starting to get a little bit excited, man.
Hmm.
I was depressed, I was struggling, I was hopeless. And then I saw drop shipping. I was like, maybe this is my way out. And then like a week I was ecstatic. And then I watched this, it's saturated video and I'm back crashing down. But I was in
Mm.
the algorithm now. I was in the YouTube algorithm of make money online. And then I got hit
Yep.
with the Billy Wilson video. And that was that.
So
Found
what? So you
SMMA and went from
tried
there.
what two, and then you had a few SMMA agencies that failed as well, right?
5.
So how many entities slash businesses did you start that failed before you started making money and starting to quote unquote figure it out?
Total, I mean, all of the ones that failed did make money. Like I did make money from them. And some of them still sustained, but I got kicked out of the businesses because I didn't have legitimate partnership agreements, and so those were big
Oh,
lessons I
wow.
had to learn. Like 2 or 3 of them actually succeeded, but I didn't get to be a part of the upside. So, but ultimately, it took me 7 tries, I think. I think it took me 7 legit tries until I found my first actually, like, really successful agency that I got to run and own.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, do you think it took you 7 tries? That's a lot. A lot of people would give up probably after 1, right?
Yeah.
What do you think you did differently? What was that turning point that actually made the last one come in? And I know, like, luck is probably a factor, right? That's a factor in everybody's success. But what do you think, looking back on it, you did differently that actually allowed your 8th try to actually work out and now make you quite a bit of comfortable money?
Part of it was that I was finally in a legitimate partnership and agreement, like, signed,
Yeah.
legit papers, like, I actually had protected myself. The second thing is that I partnered with somebody. I found a good partner. Like, I had a partner who actually complemented my skill sets. I'm an introverted back end guy. My partner is front end, promotional, sales, like that's his thing. Very extroverted and enthusiastic. I'm more industrious and back end. So that partnership dynamic was really powerful because he could go focus on promoting and selling and scaling, and I could focus on managing and making sure the ship doesn't crash. So I think that was one of the biggest things, quite honestly, is that partnership. And he also had already built a 100K a month business agency specifically, so he knew it was possible. So it was like we went in with the game plan of like not are we going to make 100K a month, but when are we going to make 100K a month? And so just some of that belief, that momentum that carried over from his beliefs, that pushed me as well and made us more successful together. So a big part was due to my partner.
Cut out there for a sec. I think you're back.
Yeah, it sometimes does that on Riverside.
Yeah.
It yeah, it happens.
What was the last thing you said? I think I missed the last couple sentences.
Um the momentum that came from
Yeah.
my partner, I think honestly that was probably the biggest difference maker.
So finding the right partner is probably everything, it sounds like.
If
And dude,
you're
like
gonna
I've
find one, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I personally have so I think I've attempted to have a partner like with my agency like I think 3 different times. And each one of them failed until I ultimately was like I just want to do this myself and I personally um like doing it myself better because I think I can make things happen faster. But then again,
Yeah.
like, dude, there's so many variables because it all boils back down to like also what do you want? Like, do you want a massive company doing multi six figures a month? Like with me, I had a video agency. I was making 40, 50 a month with high profit margins, and it was just me and a few contractors. And I was like, dude, I'm happy. Like I'm cool with this, right? Now I want to go into the coaching space, and which I end up loving a lot more. Um, so for me, it makes sense, but then there's other people that like want to build a massive agency. So
Yeah.
that parlays into my question for you. What's this is meant to be kind of open ended, broad question. I want to hear your responses. What is your driving factor? Like, why are you doing this? Why are you? Because I mean, making that much money is definitely a bit of an investment and a bit of risk and sacrifice involved. So why do you do all this?
Yeah, it's a great question, and to speak on what you were mentioning, I was fortunate enough to do a podcast with Joel Kaplan a few days ago. Um,
Oh,
we were at his event in Miami, and I got to do a pod the day before the event or a couple of days before the event. And the last question I asked him is, Joel, if you had 60 seconds left before you died, and you got to leave your son with one piece of advice, what would you leave him with? And good
dang.
podcast question.
Yeah.
And he said he thought about it for a while and he said, life is not so much figuring out how to get what you want, it's figuring out what you actually want. And I thought that was so powerful, right? It's not about how can I get things that I think I want, it's how can I figure out what I actually want. Like you can learn how to make money, but as soon as you do, like I promise you, you're going to realize it's not what you actually wanted. I thought 100, I swore for 4 years straight, 100K a month is the only thing missing from my life. And when I make
Mm.
100K a month, I'll be the happiest person in the world. I swore. Then I made 100K a month. And I remember that day I looked at the Stripe account and I think I cried because I was like, fuck. I spent 3 years on this, and I don't feel any different.
Wow.
And so you do have to figure out, like, what is it that you actually want? Dude, 40K, 50K a month, run your own agency, make stupid profit margin. Like, it's a really, really good way to run the game. It's a great way to run the game. And I
Mhm.
had a couple of those agencies, 90% profit margins, but I was hustling like a dog and there was no potential for me
Yeah.
to ever get out or sell. What ultimately changed for me
Mhm.
is I realized I don't want to be running a business forever. I want to have freedom to choose what it is I want to do. And if I want to do that, I need to build a team. This year, I've had a lot of months where I worked maybe 5 hours a week. I was just traveling to Miami and DC over the last week. Before that, I was in Peru hiking through the mountains. I've been working maybe 10 hours a week this month, and we'll do across all our agencies maybe 400K. So it's eventually I came to the conclusion, like, I want a team, I want to be able to step back, I want to be able to travel, and I want to have more freedom. That's how I kind of came to the conclusion on what do I want from the business, because I realized money alone wasn't the thing, but I do love the game of business. I'll tell you why I play, though, to answer your question a little more directly. I believe there's a great quote. I think it's frick, I'm gonna forget the person whose quote it is, but it's a good quote, and it's something along the lines of, the purpose of life is to find your gift. The meaning of life is to give it away.
Ooh.
And I think for me, business is the best mechanism I've discovered to find my gift, because I'm a huge believer in the cliche idea that your business is a reflection of who you are. So if you want to grow your business, you have to grow who you are. Everybody says, "How do I grow my business? How do I grow my business?" It's the wrong question. How do you grow yourself thus so you can grow your business? You have to become a seven-figure human being before you can become a seven-figure entrepreneur. I know it sounds woo-woo, but it's so true.
Mhm.
And so once I understood that, I realized, well, if I want to become an eight-figure entrepreneur, I have to become an eight-figure human being. If I want to become a nine-figure entrepreneur, I have to become a nine-figure human being. And if I can become a nine-figure human being, and I can go from the broke, hopeless, depressed kid to a nine-figure human being, what can I do for all the other broke, hopeless, depressed kids? Like, what can I do for all of the other people out there who are trying to grow and get better? But I have to do it myself first. You can't pour into others if your buckets are empty. So the goal with business for me is to fill up my buckets, figure out who it is I really want to become the absolute most savage version of myself that I can be, completely change. Like, I want people to see me every year. Like, you meet me at Grayson's event, I want you to meet me a year later and say, dude, you're different. And then the year after, dude, you're even more different. And then, like, every year, it's like, because I'm just growing that much and I'm pouring it all back into other people. Ultimately, my purpose in life is to serve others. I don't know how, I don't know what that's going to look like, but I know that that's the thing that's going to fill me up more than anything else, is serving others in some way, and treating my life as a sacrifice for humanity. That's what I want to do, but I have to actually become somebody worthy, um, of serving others and somebody who has something to provide if I actually want to accomplish that mission to the highest degree possible.
Dang, bro. Jeez. That was good. Pablo Picasso, by the way, that's who the quote's from. I had to look it up.
I knew it was
Um,
Picasso. That guy has
yeah.
best freaking quotes, man.
Yep. Yep. Um, Matt, what is a seven-figure human being? Do you think it's there's some quantifiable, tangible traits involved, or do you think it's subjective to the individual?
That is a very good question. There are no doubt commonalities between high earners. Um,
Yep.
I want to say it was Stanford or somebody did a study in the late 80s or maybe the late 90s where they studied the top 1% of people. And this is not a trait you're going to be expecting me to say. I promise, whatever commonality you think I'm going to say, it's completely different if you're listening to this right now. But they did a study where they went and studied the top 1% of earners, and they tried to see, like, what do they all have in common? What connections, what commonalities do they have? And what they found is there was only one common trait across all of the top 1%, and it was the size of their vocabulary. It was their ability to use and understand words. How effective were they with their speech? How eloquent were they in their communication abilities, right? Like, what was their vernacular and their ability to persuade and their ability to understand higher level words. It was the size of their vocabulary that was the one thing all the top 1% had in common. When I read that
Wow.
and I realized, like, dude, I say bet and fire and sick. Like when I read that, and I realized I had to look at myself and I had to say, do I sound like a top 1% human being? Not at all. Not at all. So I read a book. I'll give everybody this nugget. It's called Word Power Made Easy. It might be the best one of my favorite books I've read this year, the best book on vocabulary that I've come across. And I went through that book. It's like a workbook, and it changed, dude. I immediately started sounding smarter, more intelligent. People would
Wow.
like my old friends would text me and say, "Yo, when did you get so like eloquent? Like when did your speech get so good?" I was like, "Dude, I just read this book." So that's one common trait is their ability to use and understand words because words are the vehicle that we persuade people with. And business is a game of persuasion. Marketing, sales,
Mhm.
leadership, it's all persuasion. So how do we get better at persuasion? We have to get better with the vehicle, which is words, our ability to use and understand words. So that's one thing. Um, the other thing I would add on, Ridge, is seven-figure human being does not focus on what they're missing so much as they're not focused as much on what am I not doing, they're more focused on what am I doing that is hurting me, not what am I not doing that would be helping me. It's not so much like I need to read every day, I need to meditate every day. I know plenty of millionaires who don't do any of that shit. But what they don't do is they don't jack off every freaking day. They don't get drunk every other week. They don't waste their time scrolling on social media all day long. They're more focused on getting rid of the toxic traits than they are adding on the positive traits. So I think seven-figure entrepreneurs are really good at sacrificing short-term pleasure for long-term purpose. And the better and better you get at that game of sacrifice, like what can I give up? What can I give up to just get something way greater? It's my favorite word, by the way, is sacrifice. It's my favorite word in the entire world. What can I give up? Because sacrifice, like people think it's a bad word. You sacrifice something, it means you lose it for no reason. Like that's you sacrifice something to the gods or you sacrifice this or that. It's like sacrifice is giving up one thing that is good for another thing that is great. And the better you can get at that, and the better you can get at sacrificing, the more long term you start to think. And the most successful entrepreneurs think extraordinarily long term. They are long term thinkers, and sacrifice is just one embodiment of a long term thinker. So I think that's another thing that these seven-figure human beings do very, very well is they sacrifice and they think long term, and they focus on longer term gratification.
Wow, that was pretty good. So having a long time horizon, right? Being able to sacrifice and wait in order to actually get the things that you would want, and then having a good vocabulary. Those kind of the two big things you would say.
Vocabulary, getting rid of the toxic traits, and then thinking long term. And
Yeah,
vocabulary is
that's
like a
huge. I'll
fun
tell you.
bonus, I guess.
Okay, I'll tell you what, dude. Instant gratification is something I've struggled with for a long time. I don't know what it is, man. Like I like nice cars. I've got a really nice truck. I like to spend money. Like I like to make it, and then I like to spend it. It's such I say it out loud. It's so bad. But it's something I want to work on, and I'm not horrible at it. I'm pretty decent, but don't get me wrong, I still struggle with it. Why do you think so many people struggle with uh, sacrifice slash um, instant gratification?
Society. We've been trained since we were kids that when we want something, we can get it. And the more and more society develops, the easier it is for us to get things. Like you're a kid and you want food, you go into your pantry, you grab a snack, or you cry out to your mom and she makes you a meal. You want something for Christmas, you get that thing for Christmas. Not everybody, but a lot of, especially like if you're like middle class like I was, we
Mhm.
just get spoiled, man. We just like it just
Oh
gets
yeah.
really easy
Yep.
for us to get
Same.
things. Um, Stanford, this is kind of an infamous study. They did the marshmallow experiment. I'm sure you've heard of it.
Mhm.
Um, where they have the two groups of kids, or they have kids go into a room, they put a marshmallow in front of them, and they say, all right, you can have this marshmallow now, or you can wait 10 minutes and you can have two marshmallows. What they found is the kids who were willing to wait for the second marshmallow went on to be extremely more successful in all areas of life. They had better relationships, they made more money, they did better in school. The kids who were willing to wait and avoid the instant gratification, this is like 5 6 year olds they did the study on. They That carried with them throughout life, and they were more successful because they were willing to wait. So there's no doubt it's important. Why do we struggle with it so much? It's society's programmed us that way, man,
Yeah.
to want to get things as quickly as humanly possible. And our whole lives, all our habits reflect this. You want a dopamine spike? Turn on Netflix, turn on YouTube, go on
Mhm.
Instagram, put on some music. So if you want to start to retrain your brain, and you can't, like, dude, I was an instant gratified motherfucker, bro. Like, give me some cinnamon
So,
toast
okay,
crunch
I was
and some
going to
YouTube.
say
Yeah,
I was gonna ask because dude, I grew up super wealthy family. I love my parents. My father's my best friend, my biggest mentor. He makes a ton of money. But when I was
yeah,
younger, I mean, dude, super nice home. We got whatever we wanted for Christmas, right? Like I totally understand where you're coming from, and a lot of it has comes from society and our upbringing. Totally agree.
yes.
So that was gonna be my follow up question: is what you were getting into is like because you used to be instant gratification guy, now you're not at all. So where do you think that comes from? Is it something that can be trained, or does it really also come from finding your real purpose, and then that also naturally helps with it? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, so I do think there are two components of it. There's consciously retraining and reprogramming yourself, and I do think you can do that. I know you can do that. As I was saying, like, wake up, give me 2 bowls of Cinnamon Toast Crunch, put on some YouTube, and then play some Jack Harlow after I'm done, and, like, sit around and jerk off. Like, that was my junior year, bro.
Bro, cinnamon toast and crunch and Jack Harlow, man.
That was
That's the
that was my
combo.
freaking that was my freaking, like, age 16 to
And
17,
and
that's what I was
jacking off.
doing. And then jacking off after, bro.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, the
That was
trio.
me, bro. That was me. Like, every day, like, I jacked off every day, bro, for, like, 5 years straight. I'm
Oh,
serious, bro.
man,
Um,
dang.
and like, bro, it was bad. It was bad. And
Well, but
then
dude,
I
I
had
feel like most men do that, bro.
most men
Like,
do, and a
and
lot of
that's a
men
whole
never
other
stop.
conversation, man. That's a
A lot of men
Yeah.
never
A lot of
stop.
them men don't realize that they need to stop. Like, they don't even think there's anything wrong with it.
Some do, but I feel like a lot of men do know deep down that they do need to stop, because, like, you just feel
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
shit after you wank one out, bro.
Yeah.
And if you do it like 3 times in a
That's
week,
true.
5 times in a week, you're just like, bro, you start going around women and you're like, you just feel bad. You just feel, like, weird and gross.
Yeah.
Like, at least I did, and I know a lot of my friends did too. So we would try to, like, do no fap when we were, like, 17, and none of my friends would stick through it. And, but anyway, as far as, like, okay, how do you retrain your short-term gratification? The man
Mhm.
who distracts himself the man who lacks purpose distracts himself with pleasure. So if you can get really,
Yep.
really clear on your purpose, which is one of my other favorite words, purpose by definition is the reason for which something exists. It's the reason for which something is created. Your purpose is the reason you're here. It's quite literally the reason you're here. So if you discover that, if you get really clear on what your purpose on this planet is, you don't want to spend any time dwelling in pleasures anymore. You don't want to spend you when you have purpose, and, like, let's say you want to save orphan you want to feed the homeless in a certain city you grew up in, because you were homeless in that city and you made it out. Like, when you get that clear, when it's that real for you, and you're like, this is what I am here to do, you can't stand the idea of going and wasting your time and distracting yourself with pleasures, and keeping yourself away from that purpose. It completely contradicts who you want to be, and there's no part of you that wants to engage in that activity whatsoever. So when you get clear on that purpose, it becomes very clear what you need to do, and you can just ask yourself, this activity I'm about to engage in, does it bring me closer to my purpose or further away? Does it lead me towards who I want to become, or does it take me further away from that? Right? If I want to
Mm.
change the world and solve mental health or something, right? If that's my purpose, and then all day I'm going and scrolling on TikTok and watching porn and, like, doing all this BS, like, I know very clearly I'm not working towards my purpose. But if you don't have the North Star, You can lie to yourself and you can say, "Oh, it doesn't really matter anyway. What else would I be
Yeah.
doing? Yeah, like, I'll wank one out. Sure. What else do I have to do?" So if you lack true purpose, it's easy to engage in pleasure. But if you can get that clarity around who do I want to become? What am I here for? What am I on this planet to do? Then, as Nietzsche said, the man who has a strong enough why can bear almost any how. And that's what we have to start thinking about is what is my why and is it strong enough? Because the how will take care of itself if you can find the why.
Yeah, I think that's a brings up a huge question too, and this is not a I know this doesn't have a linear answer by any means, but it begs the question for those that don't have purpose, dude, how do they go about finding it? Because I know for a long time I struggled with that. I was like, I don't even know where to begin. Like, where do I even look? Where does it come from? What is purpose? It's like, I guess it could probably be paralleled or compared to love, right? Like, how do I even know what it feels like? And then people are just like, you just know. So how do you find it?
It's a great question. It's a really great question.
I don't even know if it can be answered. Like, I don't, dude, I'm not even 100% certain if I really know. Like, I think I do. You know what I mean? And like, I'm focused and I love what I do, but I know it's something I think about a lot.
So I struggled with this a lot too. Like I said this at Joel's last event. I said like my biggest struggle in entrepreneurship has always not been how do I win the game, but why am I playing in the first place?
Hmm.
That's always been my biggest challenge is why do I want to make all
Dang.
this money? Why do I want to get all these subscribers and followers? Why do I want to impress girls? Like why do I want to do this in the first place? And for me personally, I've looked for purpose in all I've studied it so much. I looked into Buddhism and Stoicism and all these philosophies and I tried to find the answers and I would like Lex Friedman, I don't know if you've ever seen that podcast, but the last question he asks all his guests is, these people like Elon and Zuckerberg and like all these great guests on. He always asks them the last question, uh, "What do you think is the meaning of life?" And they would all give their answers, and I would just like, "Oh, that's a good answer. That's a good answer. Oh, that must be it. That must be it." But it never really actually stuck. Like it sounded great, but it was always a very specious answer, and it never actually
Mm.
like felt. I never felt it in my heart. Purpose etymologically is the combination of pose, which means to hold, and then pure, which means pure. So to be in your purpose is to hold yourself purely. So you should feel that when you discover your purpose. The only time I've ever felt that, Ridge, is when I am serving God, to be quite honest. Like it's the only time I've ever actually really felt like this feels right. This feels pure. I feel like I'm holding myself purely is when I'm serving something that is completely greater than myself by its very own nature, and that's God. And that's been a struggle and a battle in itself, the ups and downs of that relationship, and trying to serve that creator. But that's the thing that has always felt the most pure to me is giving it to God. What does God want me to do? And letting your purpose not be your own self defined purpose, but a purpose that is given to you by the one that created you. And now, obviously, you have to believe in God to really accept a purpose from Him. But if you can go on that path, if you can start trying to put it in God's hands and seek Him out, I think He can start to reveal these things to you and make it really clear like this is what you're here to do. Look at these gifts I've given you. Look at what look at what you've been blessed with. Look at what you have potential to do. Now go do it, not for your own sake but for mine and for my people's sake. That's how I think about it now
Mm.
is it's not about what do I think my purpose is. It's what does God show me and reveal to me my purpose on this planet is.
And you've this could be another hour-long podcast, but talking about religion,
Yeah.
you spent quite a bit of time and still are, I think, learning and discovering. You still have questions. Yeah, I think it's probably going to be an ever evolving, always learning experience for you. Um, and I'm trying to keep these questions broad because I like you just responding to whatever comes to your head to keep it from a high level perspective. But from can you talk a little bit about your journey in discovering God and like becoming Christian, where you're at with that right now? And then what would your
Yeah.
recommendation be to people that maybe don't know what to believe or where they're at or how to find what they believe to be true?
Well, I was raised by an atheist and an agnostic. My whole life I had been
Hmm.
basically agnostic, and like I I like the idea of there being a higher power. That made sense to me. I would walk outside and I would just look and be like, "How did I get here?" You know? So the idea of some power
Yeah.
greater than me, that made sense, as I think it does to a lot of people. But the idea of Jesus never made sense to me. I never could get behind it. Never connected with it. Never was like, Jesus is Lord. Like, I looked at Christians and I would just be like, these people are hypocrites. Like, these people are judgmental hypocrites. So many of the
Yeah.
Christians I knew were
Yep.
were worse than the atheists I knew because they pretended that they were better. The atheists were like, "Yeah,
Mm.
we're not all that." But the Christians weren't either, but they would be like, "No, we're holy and pure because 'cause we're Christian." So, I always had this struggle around Jesus. Um, it's a really long story as far as how did I come to the point where I wanted to seek Jesus in the first place. Basically, I denounced God one day. I said, "I don't actually think you're there. I'm just gonna be a good person and do my best, blah, blah, blah." A day later, my friend said a prayer for me. They said, God, reveal yourself to Matt in a way that only he can understand. I had a really, really bizarre experience with the only Bible verse that I knew at the time. The next day, I got a text from a lady who used to preach the gospel to me like 3 years prior to this day. She texted me that day after the miraculous event, and she said, God put you on my heart today. Is everything okay? And then thing after thing after thing just was like, it was just weird. It was making my head hurt, man. It was literally making my head hurt. It wasn't like, "Oh, I know God's real now." It was like a battle. Like, what is going on? Like, I wanted to deny it, but part of me just couldn't. I was like, there's something weird here. So I kept going on this journey. I kept having all these miraculous experiences, but there were still questions that I couldn't get answers to, and that's what was holding me back. So I started studying something called apologetics, and apologetics is essentially logical defenses for the faith. Uh, it is cases and evidence that God is a more likely reality than no God, that theism is more likely and probable than atheism. And so I would go down those rabbit holes, watch a ton of YouTube debates, watch a ton of YouTube videos, read a
Mm.
lot of books, reading books right now. One great book is I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, where it goes over all the faith that's required for you to believe there's not a greater power, and how much faith you have to
That's
put into
interesting. That's cool.
scientific things that haven't been proven yet. Really, really powerful book. And then another really good book was called Mere Christianity by a guy named C.S. Lewis, who wrote the Chronicles of Narnia and taught at Oxford and was a brilliant, brilliant person.
Mm.
I read that book and it answered so many of my questions. And I'll tell you what really started to change things for me as far as Jesus goes specifically. One of the things C.S. Lewis says is we have to ask ourselves, who do we think Jesus Christ was? Who do you think he was? And when I was really young, was like, probably not even a real person, like, probably didn't even exist. Then I look into it, come to find out almost no historian in the world would agree with me on that. Even the atheist historians, almost all historians agree Jesus Christ was a real person. He actually existed. He's the most
Yeah.
studied man in history by far. It's not even close. So he's a real person. Okay, well, now I have to ask, who do I think he was? Just a
Yep.
good teacher, just a good guy who they made out to be God, like, but he was just a good teacher. He taught a lot of good stuff and he was, a good prophet or whatever. I'd hang out with him, grab a meal with him. That he was a good dude. C.S. Lewis says this is the one thing we must absolutely not do. He has given us no choice to say he's just a good teacher. He has not made that an option for us. Because if he was a good teacher, then he would never claim he was God unless he actually was God. If he's going to make a claim that he's God and he's not God, then we cannot call him a good teacher. We have to call him a lunatic. We have to call him delusional. We have to call him a con man, right? Like,
Mhm.
we can't say, oh, he said really great stuff. He was a good teacher. And he also just happened to think that he actually was God in human form. But that's wrong. But he was a good guy. He's a good teacher. No, like, if I told you I'm God, you're going to say, Matt, you're crazy. It doesn't matter if the last 45 minutes has been sound business advice. You're going to say, Matt, you're
Yeah.
nuts. So then I had to ask, okay, well, this guy said he was God and he had all these amazing teachings. Historians agree on four things. Jesus was a real person. He was crucified under Pontius Pilate. He performed miracles in his lifetime in some way, and he appeared to his early disciples after his death in some way. Even the atheists believe in those four things, even the atheist historians and the Christian historians. So you take those four things that are commonly agreed upon by the people who study this and are experts in the field. Then you take the fact that Jesus has given us no option to say, he was just a good guy and it was miscommunication. Like, no, he straight up said, the only way to the Father is through me. I and the Father are one. If you have seen me, you have seen the Father. He has told us time and time again that he is the one true Son of God. So then I have to ask, well, who was he? Perhaps the most logical explanation is the guy was who he said he was. Or the only other option is he was a complete lunatic. And I find it much harder to believe that Jesus Christ was a lunatic and a con man than he was who he said he was. And once I started to really meditate on that and I try to wrap my head around how do I answer this question, who was Jesus? The most logical answer I could come to was he was who he said he was. He was God. So that was a big turning point
That's
for me.
awesome, dude. Yeah, that's cool. What would you recommend to people that maybe don't know what to believe? Or like where do they begin to look? Because there's so many like, and I had a conversation with somebody a few days ago. It was really, really cool. And they were like, um, they're atheist and they're a
Yeah.
client of mine. But uh it was a good conversation because I obviously asked her, I was like, why are you atheist? And she said, because she has dove deep into Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, like basically every religion under the sun. She's read the books, like she has, because she's found so much intrigue in everything. And she's come to the conclusion that there is no God, there's nothing at all. And it's so interesting to me because like I used to be a really closed-minded person. Like very closed-minded. I thought I had a bunch of arrogance for what? Like I didn't do anything. I haven't accomplished anything. I don't know why I was so arrogant. And I've become a lot more open-minded, and I feel like I'm becoming that more and more every day because of the people that I'm meeting and the higher level conversations I'm having with people. And I guess this isn't really a question per se, but it's so interesting to me how I can meet so many people that I would consider intellects, and they can have such differing points of view and be so convicted in their beliefs in religion specifically. And it's so interesting to me. And I just sit back and I go, I think, I don't know, it just goes to show like how, I don't know. What do you think about that? Do you agree or disagree? And like, what are your thoughts on it?
I used to ask myself so much, like, if God's real, why do so many smart people not believe in him? Especially
Yeah.
entrepreneurs, because I'm an entrepreneur.
And real quick, what's crazy is she would say the same thing of why do so many smart people believe in God, right? So
Yeah.
it's crazy to think about all these different dynamics. So continue.
Yeah. So I would think about like all these great entrepreneurs, like why doesn't Elon Musk believe in God? He's so smart. Why doesn't Jeff Bezos believe in God? Why doesn't Alex Hormozy believe in God? He's so smart. And as I've read the Bible, it's become perfectly clear to me why that is. The sin of all sins, the ultimate disconnection from God is pride. And the smarter, more successful somebody is in a human life, the more pride they put into their own understanding, into their own intellectual ability, the more pride they take in how much they know. If you want to connect with God, you have to surrender yourself. You have to say, God, I can't do this on my own. I am not smart enough. I am not strong enough. I am not wise enough in my humanly form to do this on my own. And the more successful somebody is in this world, the harder it is for them to do exactly that, to surrender themselves. And so that's why I think the disconnection is so clear is that they aren't willing to submit their own strength and their own pride to God. And that's what keeps them disconnected. For me, when I surrendered myself and I said, you know what, God, I can't do it on my own. I'm not strong enough. I need you. He started to show himself to me. And I started to feel him. And I started to feel his presence and I started to understand his love. And the Bible started to make sense for me. And I started to connect on a deeper level with everything I was reading and learning and being told at church. And it all started to actually make sense to me. Wherein like The last 3 months, I've gone from, I don't know about Jesus to like, I'm fired up. Like I'm like one of those annoying Christians now, bro, to where I'm like, I'm so convicted of who he is because I surrendered all of my pride and my own understanding. The Bible says, lean not on your own understanding, but incline your ear to my wisdom. So you have to incline your ear to God and not lean on your own self. And that's why I think so many smart people are so disconnected from God and so close minded to it because they want to be able
Yeah.
to rationalize God in their own human minds. They don't want to let God tell them who he actually is. They want to be able to they want to try to tell themselves who God is rather than let God do that for them.
It's dude, it's so interesting because I feel like we talk about this for hours. And I know you do the same thing with a bunch of other dudes that you're in your circle. But
Yeah.
um, so
My
one
favorite thing to
thing,
talk
another thing
about.
too that I think, yeah, and that's really good too. Like that's cool. It shows your conviction, your belief, which is it's admirable. Um, what Oh, so another thing I respect about you too, and this is, I think, a commonality amongst a lot of very highly successful people, is like for example, when we were hanging out in Scottsdale and we are having the conversation in the same topic. What I respect a lot about you, and like I would engage in conversations about religion, not very often. I should do it more because it's cool to hear different perspectives. Um, but on the occasion when I would, they would always have an answer for everything, even if it didn't really make sense. And with you, I would
Yeah.
bring up some questions. And there were times when you were like, you knew the answer and you were confident and you could back it up. But then there were times where you were like, I don't know. And I have the same question. And that's something you're still learning about. So I think the ability to say, like, I don't know, like, it's a good question, something that could potentially stump somebody. That's an indicator of, like, in my opinion, who truly believes in what they say they believe in versus who doesn't really, or maybe they just say they do because they want to, or they've been brought up in it. But I think, what are your thoughts on that? Like the fact that people can
Mm.
admit, I don't know, but I want to learn more about it versus just defending something they don't really understand. I think that was something cool that I picked up on you, and I was like, this guy's got conviction.
It's a really interesting point, man. We have to normalize being able to say, I don't know the answer to this question. We live in a society where everybody wants to act like they know everything because that's what we put our value in. And that's, we want to have these identities with everybody we come in contact with. It's okay to not know the answers to things. It's actually much better to say, I don't know the answer than to say you do know the answer and then say something that's completely bogus. And I have a lot of Christian friends who do this. And it was one of the things that turned me off in the beginning is I would ask them questions and they would give me these really sharp and specious answers, seeming like they made sense, but actually weren't plausible because they wanted to. They wanted to prove him to me so strongly that they weren't willing to say, you know what, I don't have an answer for that. They would instead create these kind of fancy um, uh, circumventions, these fancy circumventions around the actual
Mhm.
question. Is like it turned me off. It turned me off. So I think it's okay to not have the answers to everything. I think the more I've started to study God, the more I've realized you're never going to be able to answer every question about God. And if you could, then that means you would have to be God because God is omniscient, meaning he's all knowing. So the only way you could have all the answers is if you also were omniscient and all knowing, but you can't because you're just a little puny human. So I've had to really just understand that and humble myself. And I think it's a good practice to get into of just saying, I don't have all the answers. I don't have all the answers now. There's questions that still trip me up and I don't know the answers to, but I have enough answers to enough questions with enough evidence to enough things where I say, I don't have all the answers on one side or the other. If I was an atheist, I'd have questions for God. I'd have questions about why I don't believe that I wouldn't be able to answer because there's a lot of good stuff on the side of the Christian. And the same goes for me as a
Mhm.
Christian on the side of atheism. There's some things I can't answer, but I have enough evidence to this side of Christianity where I say, you know what? If I had to pick, if my life was on the line, this is the side I would go to. If you put a gun to my head and you said, "Was Jesus God? Yes or no?" If you get it right, you live. If you get it wrong, you're done. If you put like if you put my life on the line 3 months ago, I would have said, "Ah, it's probably let me say a prayer real quick, but I don't think Jesus was God." That's what I would have said.
Mhm.
Now you take that same situation, I would say, you know what? I think I think Jesus was God. and I don't have all the answers, but if a gun's to my head, I had to pick, that's what I would pick after doing an immense amount of research, prayer, and having my own really interesting encounters and experiences. It's very hard for me to think of anything else, man, to think it
That's
could be any
awesome,
other
dude.
answer.
I've got
Yeah.
a I still struggle a lot with pride myself. Like there's so many times too I will like engage in any sort of a debate or discussion and like try to defend things that I really don't know. I will say getting into like the coaching space has helped tremendously because bro, people are paying you and their livelihoods are like determined, not determined, but very heavily influenced by what you're coaching them on. You better fucking be very well versed in what you're talking about. Right. And
Yeah.
so, like, you have to be hypercritical of the things you're giving advice on, make sure you're qualified to give advice on it. And so I'll tell you what, it's helped me so much with like humbling myself and also coaching myself, like
Yeah.
learning how to be a good coach. It's crazy how much I'm learning about it. But I
You
want to
know,
go
one
ahead.
thing on that real quick, there's a great book, I'd recommend checking it out. It's called The Coaching Habit, and it basically creates the thesis that the best coaches, they don't give the best answers, they ask the best questions,
Hmm.
and I
Yep.
find that to be really interesting. I was debating an atheist. We were at Joel Kaplan's event a few days ago, as I mentioned, and the first night, one of
Dude, I
the
would
other
have loved to
speakers,
be a fly on the wall for that.
dude, it was good. It was a fun time, dude. And there's like 15 SMMA guys crowded in this little apartment, and they're all expecting to talk about business and all this stuff. And me and one of
Yeah.
the other guys who was speaking at the event, we start talking about God, and he's like, big atheist, really intelligent guy, really into science, and all these things. And we just start going down, going down, going down, going down the rabbit hole. And the more and more I asked him questions, the more and more I came to the realization, I think a lot of people in the room came to the realization, he didn't really have good answers. I didn't beat him by saying, "No, this is the truth. Listen to what the Bible
Mhm.
says." I just asked him
You
questions.
asked
"Why
the
do you
right
believe
questions.
that? Why
Yeah,
do you believe that? How did that happen? How do you explain this? How does this and that work?" And the more and more I asked him questions, the more he started to question his own beliefs, and that's where we make changes as people, is when we on our own accord question our beliefs. Not when we're told that we are wrong, but when we come to our own conclusion that we don't have all the information. That's when we become open to a new way of thinking, which is essentially what a coach does. Say, open somebody up to a new and better way of thinking. So the coaching habit could be a really good book to check out there. But
I
yeah, man,
appreciate it
I
for sure. It's
think
funny
that's a great
you
point.
bring that up because, like, that's another thing I'm learning too, like, the best coaches, because like, I'm learning and I've also got my coaches too, like, a bunch of mentors. The best coaches don't talk, they ask. Right? Like I found my best coaching and mentorship sessions have been in instances where my coach isn't really talking. Like I'll ask questions, but instead of responding with advice or anything, they'll usually respond with another question. And it's crazy how that works, but totally
Mm,
agree. Okay, man. So we're getting close to an hour here. I've got another question for you, and then I've got a final leaving question for you.
okay.
Um, so okay, why do you make content? I love that you post so much and you always like on YouTube, on Instagram, you got a big following. People love you. And I love how you talk about serve others. I think that's the one thing in your Instagram bio. That's it. And then whenever you make content, you're also talking a lot about like, I'm not a coach. I got nothing to sell you. I'm just making content to help you guys out. And you talked before in this podcast about how you're so big on your purpose and just serving others. You might not know exactly what that's like, but you know you're here to serve others. So, have you thought about what are you hoping to ultimately get out of content, or do you not really hope to get anything out of it, aside from just helping as many people as you can and not really knowing what that quantifiable measure is?
I've to go back to what we were talking about earlier. I think I've come to the conclusion that I don't need to have the answer to that question yet, and I don't need to force it. I can just make good content to make good content. Like, I'm sure I'll make some sort of offer in the future. Maybe I don't know, man. I don't know. Maybe I never will. Maybe I'll never sell anything to my audience. Who knows? Maybe I will. Like, I'm writing a book right now. That's a big thing. I don't really think of that as like
Oh, sick.
selling. A book's not going to make me a ton of money. I'm making the
Yeah.
books. I love
Yeah.
writing and I want to provide that value to people. But, what am I hoping to get out of it right now? It's been great, dude. I've started a podcast. I've gotten invited to different events in different places. I've got to meet great people. I've got to like have amazing one-on-one conversations with people I'd have to pay an obscene amount of money to usually talk to otherwise.
That's
I have
true.
a great form
Yeah.
of networking leverage. I've been able to recruit great team members from my personal brand. It's just like it's
Yep.
been a great
That's true.
investment for me, and I love doing it. I respond to every single YouTube comment. There's not a single comment I haven't responded to. I respond to every single DM. Like, I'm passionate about it. And where am I 5 years from now as far as my brand goes? I have no idea, but I know that if I keep being my authentic, real self and making content around that person, I'm always gonna love it. I'm always gonna have fun with it.
Bro, I love that. And I think that's the epitome of at the core what every content creator should do. 99% of people make content probably to sell something, right? They're doing it for some sort of an outcome. I know a few people that do it with dude, no reason. Like I'm just doing this to serve. That's it. I don't know what's gonna come from it or
Yeah,
what's gonna happen. I'm just here to help other people. But I think at its core, that's really what matters. And that's what's going to differentiate the brands that ultimately succeed and the ones that don't. Because you can tell
yeah,
who's actually there to help other people and who's actually there to just, make as much money as they can. And obviously there's a
yeah.
balance, right? There's a
I was
lot of
gonna say, I
coaches,
do
like the
think you can
space is
have
incredibly
both.
saturated for sure. And you want to have both. Like at the end of the day, none of us are doing this completely out of the kindness of our hearts and that's it. Like that's obviously not the expectation, but
Yeah,
there are a lot of people that really do it for the money. Like, dude, the space is so saturated. I'm seeing so many people that don't know what they're talking about at all. They're just trying to make money. You know what I mean?
yeah, 100%. I wanna be clear, like, I'm not some selfless, like, completely selfless, uh, I don't know, guru, whatever. Like, there's everything we do is selfish. Family Guy had this extremely wise episode years ago that my brother watched. I don't watch Family Guy, but my brother watched it, and he pointed this question at me when I was in, I think I was maybe like 17 at the time, and he was like, "There's no such thing as a selfless act." I was like, "What are you talking about, bro? If I give somebody all my money, that's selfless." He said, "Well, why'd you give him all your money?" And I said, "Well, because I wanted to help the person." Wait, who wanted to do what? I wanted to help the person. I wanted. It's about me. Okay, well, hold on. What if I
Mm,
did it anonymously and nobody knew? Well, why would you do that? Because it all comes back to I wanted, I wanted, I wanted. So there's no such thing as a selfless act. There's
yeah,
there's two forms of
of course.
selfishness. There's selfishness and there's selfless selfishness. And I think our goal, it's okay for your goal to just be, how can I be as selflessly selfish as possible? If impacting people makes me
Yep.
feel good, it's still selfish, but it's also selfless by its very own nature because I'm also doing it for other people. So that's how I think about the YouTube, is like, at the end of the day, I'm doing it because it makes me feel good. Right. If I feel better because I didn't
Mhm.
sell something, that's just as selfish as if I would feel better from the money I would make if I did sell something. It's the same thing. It's still selfish. But how can I optimize for being as selflessly selfish as possible? That's how I'm trying to think about it, and that's kind of my goal with the tube right now.
I, I like that a lot, dude. I like that a lot. Like it's good to keep that balance. And I think it's, yeah, it's money. Um,
Yeah.
so, okay. Last question for you, dude. And the age might differ based on where you're at in life. But how old are you right now?
22.
20, 22.
Yeah.
How you said 32?
22.
22? You're
22.
22 right now?
Yeah.
No, you're not. You're not 22. There's no way.
Yeah. Not
You're
32,
actually
I
22 years
promise.
old?
Yeah.
Dude, you're 22? Holy shit, bro. You're so much younger than I thought you were.
I
It's the
just have a
beard. That's
beard
probably what it
and
is.
bad
Yeah.
hairline.
It's the beard more than anything. I'll tell you that.
The
Don't
beard
worry. Your hair looks
helps. The
amazing, bro.
beard
Okay, so let's say how old were you in freshman year?
of high school?
Yeah,
14, 15.
14. Okay, cool. Okay, so your 14-year-old self, maybe even 15. Let's say you walk into a room, you're going back in time. You know the question I'm about to ask you. You see this kid. What's the one thing you're going to say to him?
One thing I could say to my 14-year-old self:
Mm-hmm.
the more you focus on yourself, the less happy you'll be.
Mm. Perfect, dude. That's something I'll probably marinate on for a minute. Um, Matt, thank you for so much for hopping on, dude. I
Thank you,
appreciate it.
bro.
This
This
was
was so
awesome.
fun.
Thanks for setting aside an hour of your time. Um, dude, if you're cool with it, I'm gonna pump out some reels for this. I just want to give back to the people that follow me. I want them to be aware of you and follow you, and digest everything you're doing. So if you're down, it'd be cool to collaborate on some stuff. I can give you some
100%.
reels as well. I think that'd be awesome to give you some content too. But
Be amazing,
nonetheless, where
man.
can people find you at? Aside from this, where can
Yeah,
people find you?
if you look up Matt Shields on YouTube, it should come up. If not, look up Matt Shields SMMA, and then Instagram's official Matt Shields. TikTok, I think, is official Matt Shields. Facebook's just Matt Shields. Um, yeah,